I'm joined today on the podcast by Máirtín, father of Daithí and the driving force behind the Donate for Daithí campaign. Máirtín, can you start just by telling us a bit about who you are, Máirtín?
Okay, well, that's a very good question, and to be honest, it should be an easy question to answer. But before Daithí came into my life, it's hard for me to remember the person that I was. But I'll have a go at it anyway.
Yes, yeah.
I was born in West Belfast in Ballymurphy. I had a very loving upbringing, and I'm still in Ballymurphy now. And it's just it was a fantastic place for me to grow up in, and I'm very happy to say that my own children are now growing up in Ballymurphy. It was a very tough place to grow up in as well. Growing up in the 90s in Ballymurphy, I seen a lot of things that children probably shouldn't see, and that I'm very grateful that my children don't have to see. But at the same time, we had this, connection with your neighbours in Ballymurphy that it was that type of, connection where you could run in and out of your neighbours' houses. You could, you know, you were never without a cup of tea because there was always tea bags, and that's something that's not there as much anymore in a lot of communities. But I'm happy to say that I still see it in the likes of Ballymurphy. So growing up in Ballymurphy, as I said, it was a great journey. My mother and father, they helped start the local Irish language school in Ballymurphy, and they started out with my older brother, who I think there was about 6 people in his class. I was the second year. There were 7 of us, and then now that school is the school where Daithí and my other son goes to as well, and it's a thriving school. It's part of the community, and just from then, going on to the likes of College to Farcia, my whole life was kind of based around the Irish language.
Yeah.
I went and got a degree in Irish language. I then became a teacher. I taught in the school that I went to, and then at that stage, I was in my life in maybe 2014, 2015. I had all these big plans for myself, and I basically wanted to change the world, as everybody wants to do, when they're starting off their
Yeah.
careers. And then what should have been one of the happiest times in my life, when we found out that we were going to have a child, it changed absolutely everything.
Now, you're obviously behind the campaign.
Yep.
But before that campaign, there was obviously a point that you learned about Daithí's condition as a father. Can you tell me about how that felt at that time?
I can remember it very well. 20-week scan. And to be honest, our biggest worry of that 20-week scan was finding out the sex of the baby. We had decided beforehand, a lot of people don't like to find out,
Yeah.
but we had decided we were going to find out. So that was our biggest worry getting into that scan. And probably a bit ignorant on my part as well. I thought that is the only reason for that scan. But it's a 20-week anomaly scan where they look at everything. And we were in that scan. We were very nervous to find out if our wee baby was going to be a boy or a girl. And then as they were looking at the different parts of the baby, there was a bit of a silence when they came to the baby's heart. And again, I was oblivious to all this. Where Seth, Daithí's mum, she knew right away that there was a difference. And the woman said to Seth, there's a problem with the baby's heart, but that's all I can tell you now. There was no cardiologist on site, and they said that we would have to wait about 5 weeks to find out what was wrong, but it was a severe condition. Oh, and it's a boy. That didn't matter anymore. That silence was you know, I can, in a way, I can still hear that silence. And we left. Everything changes when you find out that there's an issue. And we had, you know, I can remember we left the hospital. We only lived around the corner. We walked home in silence and sat there in silence for hours. We didn't know what was, and to be honest, there was a massive pressure because we told our family that we were finding out the sex of the baby. So we then thought we were letting everyone down. It was a horrendous time, and we only had to wait 2 weeks then to meet with cardiology, and it was then that we found out that Dahi had a condition called, or what that Dahi would have a condition called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which basically would mean that the left side of the heart wouldn't develop. It's one of the more uncommon heart conditions because congenital heart defects are they are the most common birth defects. But when there's no cure for this, but we may be able to manage this condition. So when that happens, you then have, you know, that 12-week scan and that 20-week scan, those scan photos become precious. We ended up with 20 more of those photos because we had to go back, you know, maybe every week or twice a week. And even at that time, I was I don't know if I was in denial. I didn't really know. I suppose people would tell me the same thing, that they knew a family member who had a heart condition, and they went and they got that hole in their heart fixed. And I think I was just sick of telling people that this is a lot more serious than that. And but again, I was protecting myself as well until the moment when Seth was in labour with Dahi. Now, I have to be very careful how I say this because I was thinking it was a long, quiet day, but I wasn't in labour. It was Seth. I'm sure she would see it very different. However, it was, you know, it was two days, and we were chatting. You know, you have this bond with the midwife, and it was the three of us and Seth's mum Maria, and you know, you're just talking about everything and anything, and at that moment you're kind of forgetting what this seriousness is coming. And they had a wee small blue hat waiting to put on Dahi straight away, and it was smaller than normal because cardiac babies are usually smaller. About 8:20 p.m. on the 21st of October, things changed, and it was kind of like, I'm not sure if there was this big red button, but it felt like, because the room packed. So what was quiet for the last 12 hours, there were consultants, nurses, more midwives, and at 8:52, Dahi was born. He was big, or bigger than they were expecting. He was also pink. They told us he would be a shade of blue maybe because he was born with this severe condition. And at that moment, I thought to myself, maybe they've got it wrong. Maybe they tried to put the pink hat, or they tried to put the blue hat on him, and it was too small for his head because he was bigger. So they actually had to put a pink hat on him. And Saf got 10 seconds of skin to skin. I wasn't allowed to touch Dahi. I was allowed to take a quick photograph. And then that was him, gone for maybe 4 hours. They had to, bring him to neonatal intensive care. They had to start him with medication straight away that would basically keep him alive. And it wasn't until we had more kids that I realised how different it is. When a child comes into this world, you get to spend hours and hours there. But it was kind of like nothing. And Saf had just given birth. She had the 10 seconds, and then he was gone. So God knows how that made her feel, because I was devastated.
Yeah.
But Dahi was actually a part of her. And then he was just taken off her. Saf was absolutely exhausted. So in the wee hours before maybe 1 a.m., 2 a.m., I can't really remember, I was allowed to go down to the neonatal intensive care to see Dahi. And he was absolute perfection. He was so perfect. And that was it. I got to go home. I actually walked around the same house that we walked around in silence in. I'd poured myself a Havana club that I bought in Cuba that summer. And I just hosted the Saf and Dahi, and there was a plan in place though. And when Dahi was 2 days old, he would be flown to, originally it was supposed to be Birmingham, but there was a virus on the ward in Birmingham, and then we were told we were going to London. It's mad how these wee things happen, because London is such a massive part of our lives, and that could have been Birmingham. So at 2 days old, Saf hasn't even recovered. We're on a private airplane with Jeremy, the intensive care consultant, flying us over. And, then you start realising how serious everything is. We get straight onto the runway, straight onto the plane, no security or anything like that. The doctor is your security in a way. And we land in London, and there's an ambulance waiting for us, and we're blue lighted straight to Evelina in London. And that's where I got to hold Dahi for the very first time at 2 days old. It was probably at 3 days old, actually, because I can remember holding him and realising that he was going for his first open heart surgery the following day. So Dahi had open heart surgery, major open heart surgery, at 4 days old. And that open heart surgery is called the Norwood procedure. And there's no cure for hypoplastic left heart syndrome, but the Norwood procedure is a part of a 3-part surgery that manages this condition. And the way it should have gone is that you get this surgery in the first couple of weeks of life. Then the second stage would be the first few months of life. And then the third stage would be maybe anywhere between 4 and 6 years old. So Dahi got this first stage, and I can remember Professor Anderson, the surgeon, he was from here. And it was nice to see and hear a familiar face. Well, maybe not a familiar face, but a familiar voice or familiar accent. And, I can remember him saying, he always said, "We're going to look after your boy. We're going to do our best for your boy." And he did. They all did. But unfortunately, it didn't. It probably gone to plan for them, but it didn't go to plan for Dahi's body. It didn't, react as well as it should have. But we left after Dahi's surgery. Professor Anderson said to us that it would be like operating on the size of a walnut for 8 hours. We left the hospital that night on the 25th of October 2016, and Dahi was doing well. And we went back to the Premier Inn where we were staying. We had a meal. We even had a wee pint and clinked to Dahi and to the success of this surgery until 6:30 a.m. the next morning when we got that phone call to say, "You got to come over here." And when we got there, it was frantic, and they told us that Dahi's body was failing. His saturation levels were dangerously low, and he wasn't that shade of pink that he was when he was born. He was dark blue. They told us that our options were, our only options at that stage to give Dahi the best chance of survival was to go on this machine called ECMO, which is another operation to get this machine connected to you, and it basically gives the body a break. It's a life support machine. However, it's also a machine that comes with a lot of risks of stroke and other risks. So that was another consent form. And on these consent forms, it's the same thing. You know, you have your risk of bleeding, you have your risk of X, Y, and Z. But the only risk that was on Dahi's one was the main risk, and that was the risk of death. And signing your name to that, it's hard to explain. It's terrible. But we did it, and he came back, and Dahi was connected to this machine, and there was these two massive tubes coming out of this little boy who was 4 or 5 days old. And he could spend 5 days on ECMO to try and give his body a bit of a break to see. And every day, nothing. All we could see is the blood clots gathering in this machine, and if any of these blood clots go into his body, it could cause a stroke, and just this fear all the time round the clock. On day 5, no improvements. So they stretch it into day 6. And the only way I can describe this day 6 is a Hollywood movie. And day 6 was also Halloween. Professor Anderson hadn't arrived yet, but in this cubicle in intensive care, it seemed like there was maybe 20, 30 people. And they were all arguing about what was best for Dahi. They didn't have time to worry about our feelings or because it was such an emergency. And at that stage, Dahi was given under a 10% chance of survival. And Professor Anderson walked in silence. And that's when decisions had to be made. So he gave us 2 decisions. He gave us the decision of doing the operation again, upsizing a shunt that he didn't think would work, or else stopping treatment. Dahi was comfortable. He was on a lot of, medication that was making him comfortable. And we could stop treatment and let him pass away peacefully there. And at that very moment, Dahi opened his eyes. And looked directly at Professor Anderson. Remember, there's 20, 30 people in this small space. He locked eyes with Professor Anderson. Professor Anderson turned to us and said, "Your boy wants to live." He also said that this opening of the eyes, unfortunately, doesn't increase his chances. But for us, it increased hope. And hope, when you have very little hope, is so powerful. It made the decision for us to get those consent forms out again, sign that, and try. Because we don't know at that stage, without Dahi opening his eyes at that time, we don't know what the best decision would have been for Dahi had he not opened his eyes at that very moment. And we signed the consent forms. Professor Anderson worked on him again. We went home to the hotel. We were both planning Dahi's funeral, leaving the hotel. We would find out months later that we were both thinking the same thing. Went back to the hotel, totally defeated, and Hocus Pocus was on the TV. And I can remember falling asleep to that, waking up the next morning to Seth letting out this shout of, "He's off ECMO." And we went straight over to the hospital, and that's when the journey of hope would then become a bit more hopeful.
I just think of as a parent, you think you can protect your kids from everything like it, but it's totally out of your hands, and that isn't it? It's like you're relying on, like you're saying, doctors, nurses, and you as a father and as a mother. Nearly hopeless in a way, isn't it? You're
No,
just
that's
hopefully relying on other people.
and
Um,
when a few of my friends, their partners have had children since, and I tell them, you will feel this love when they are born that you will never have felt before,
yeah.
and it's hard to describe. I feel that love now. I can't remember a time where I didn't feel that love. But before the 21st of October 2016, before Dahi was born, I didn't know what that love felt like.
Yeah, look, I've two kids, and I think it's that concept of, I'm just thinking, like, we worry at a cold, we worry at a high temperature. I can remember panicking. My daughter put a tic tac up her nose and jumping in the car and heading to the Royal Hospital, and she sneezed
Yeah.
halfway down the road. And the panic was over,
Yeah.
and you're going, like, the trivialness of those moments compared to your story. But, like, you know, I feel as a parent, like, the fear that comes in those moments of a kid falling and tripping, and what you're talking about, like, is just, you know, it just thinking how you deal with that as a parent is absolutely mind blowing. And you know, I don't know how you would describe admiration, what words you would use on what you're going through, but obviously, like I've read a lot about, you know, obviously the story, but there's something there that I'm thinking. At what point did you realize that, like, this story is no longer your family story, if you know what I mean? That we need to do that campaign. You've obviously driven the campaign, but the campaign, I think, was about the love of a child initially, but it's become so much more than that, isn't it? I suppose more about thousands of lives rather than the life of your child.
Well, Dahi would go on to have that second stage.
Yeah.
And it was quiet. He was back home, and he was actually back home from hospital. He was in our house, and I suppose fast forward to January of 2018 then, when Dahi was then being prepped maybe for his third stage, and that third stage for us would have been, you know, just managing. That would have been his treatment completed, and you know, he would of course be under the eyes of cardiology for the rest of his life and all that. However, when we went back to London in January 2018, we found out that Dahi had a severe regurgitation in his tricuspid valve, which meant that he couldn't have the third stage operation, which meant that the only option now was that of a heart transplant, if he was accepted onto the heart transplant waiting list. So this is January 2018. And we would have to wait until the 1st of June to find out if Dahi was accepted onto the waiting list for the gift of a new heart. So in that time between January and June, you're in total limbo. You don't know if there's any hope, because the last hope for Dahi at that stage was to be accepted onto the list. Now that brings about a million different hurdles, but to cross that first hurdle of getting on the waiting list, I took that phone call and I broke down. I wouldn't be much of a crier, or I wasn't much of a crier, until I realised how powerful it is to cry and to, you know, to let that out. And to hear that Dahi had been accepted onto the list on the 1st of June 2018, it was such a relief. But what I had been doing from January to June, I became obsessed with transplantation, organ donation, the statistics, the facts, and the figures. I had read every report available. You know, Saf would wake up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and I would be reading. I would be looking at other campaigns, remembering other family-run campaigns that had such success. And I realised at that moment, in those moments between January and June, that there was only 42% of our 42% of our population had joined the register, to say yes to organ donation. And I thought, that number is quite low. Now, apparently at that stage, that number, professionals were happy with that number because it was on the rise. But for me, whose child's only hope was the gift of organ donation, and the statistics around that 90% of our population support organ donation, it didn't add up to me. So I thought straight away, we will run an awareness campaign in West Belfast. We will launch it where I worked at that time, in Glornamona, and we'll invite members of the community. West Belfast was actually at the lowest amount of registrations on the NHS organ donor register at that time. And I thought, we'll just create a bit of awareness here in our native West Belfast, and that'll be us, really. So we launched the campaign. Dahi was accepted on the list in June 2018. By the end of June, I was ready to go. Donate for Dahi was launched, and it was absolutely packed with members of the community, politicians from across the divide, the Lord Mayor of Belfast, media. Everybody wanted to talk to us. And it was at that time that I noticed, that I realised this story is much bigger than doing something in West Belfast. And we have the opportunity, our campaign, our family, to do something a lot more positive. And I didn't realise at that time that it wouldn't just be in Ireland and the UK, that the story would go all over the world, that he would have the impact, his story would have the impact that it did, that lives would be saved in Dahi's name while he waits to be saved himself. And that's one thing that I'm trying to do now, is to reflect on all the achievements. But one thing that does come to mind is that back when I was that teacher, and I wanted to change the world in 2014 and 15, and I look now and think, I didn't change the world, but my son did. Yeah. And I told the story. I had the honour of telling his story and using his story to help people be okay with the concept of organ donation. Because as a society, we aren't great around the question of death. Me personally, I'm not great with that either. But Dahi's story and people being on that journey with us has made it easier for people. And the amount of families that have joined the register as a family because of Dahi's story, it's incredible. The fact that Dahi has a law named after him. He has the freedom of Belfast City. And his story is continuing to help save lives. We're hearing, we hear of the statistics every year, and it blows my mind that we as a family, as a campaign, were able to help facilitate that change. So it's one thing that I'm very proud of, and in a way, I look back at that person that I was, and that's why it's hard for me to remember who that person was, because we've sacrificed so much as a family to do that. I personally have given up a career in teaching. I see my friends and my colleagues who are now doing amazing for themselves, and I'm very happy for them. But I give up all of that and all the potential of a career here and there. However, I found something much more valuable on that journey, and it's Saf, it's Dahi's mum, who has reminded me of all that on our journey. You know, when you're looking back at everything that you've helped to achieve, that Dahi's achieved, that we've achieved as a family, if you're lucky to be looking back when you're 80 years old, to think, you know, I could have had this nice car, this nice house, or, you know, these nice holidays. However, we can look back and think the people we helped facilitate, the people were still alive because we chose to open our lives up to society. And that alone makes me think that if I were to go back to 2016, that I wouldn't change anything, even with the sacrifices made. So this isn't feel sorry for me because I had to sacrifice A, B, and C. You mentioned the love for your children and how being powerless, you know, how that can make you feel. I can tell you how it made me feel. It's that desperation that you have, that you protect your children as a parent. I can't protect Dahi from his condition. So in my head, everything I was doing, shouting from the rooftops, knocking on the politicians' doors, getting people around the table who don't agree around the table to agree on things. You know, that is me trying to protect my son from his condition, trying to give him the best chance of getting that gift of a new heart, because we can't individually help Dahi. And what I mean by that is all the awareness we raise can't directly help Dahi. He doesn't go up on the list because we're this family who talk about organ donation. But if everybody on the list and families like ours around Ireland, around the UK, you know, we're all increasing everybody's chances by doing what we're doing, and Dahi's included in that. So that's my way of thinking, that I'm helping my son and protecting him, or trying to protect him as best I can from a condition that I can't protect him from.
Yeah, because I think getting on the list is only the start of the race, isn't it? It's only the start of that journey, because there's so many other factors now have to come together in terms of getting a transplant, getting a suitable donation and things like that, isn't it?
And to be honest, children wait 2.5 times longer than adults. Children are a lot more likely to die on the list as well, waiting for the gift of a heart transplant. And we were told back then that Dahi's wait would be about 3 years, and he's over 7 years on the list. Now that's to be celebrated as well.
Yeah.
Because by them saying 3 years, that means that Dahi's native heart has been beaten for 4 extra years than they thought. And he's still doing well, he's still stable. Now we do see differences in him. And he notices now that he's different from other children. But he has that hope in his heart that if he gets the gift of a new heart, or when he gets the gift of a new heart, that his quality of life will hopefully be so much better. But yes, it's Dahi in the journey. COVID was huge in the journey, where transplants basically stopped. Then Dahi's own health. He was suspended from the list, and he had an all or nothing operation to get him back onto the list, which thankfully was successful. And he's back on the list. He's still fighting. And you know, his hospital is now in the Freeman Hospital in Newcastle, so he's no longer under London. And they're always actively seeking ways to give Dahi more time, because that's what this journey's all about. There's no cure. It's all time. And we hope it's a long time. And if there's any way that, you know, especially with medical science and advancements, and, you know, if there's any way that they could keep Dahi's native heart, because when you get a transplant, on average, we've been told that it's 15 years. Dahi's only 8 years old. So that's not a long time on average. So we, in a way, you know, we're desperate for him to get a new heart, but we're also desperate that his own half a heart keeps beating and keeps being stable. So it's kind of like that double-edged sword where you just want it to happen at the right time that gives him the most time with us and his wee brothers. And, you know, because life has changed so much for Dahi as well. He's now got 3 little brothers. They need him. We need him. And in a way, our society needs him too, because they've all become part of our family, because we have opened our lives up to them.
Does he ask much about his condition, Máirtín? Is he inquisitive about it himself? And I know he's obviously only 8 years old, but
he is.
I'm sure he's extremely mature in his thinking because of his condition.
He has grown up with this as well.
Yeah. And
this is the thing, there's no rule book to raise children in general, but there's no rule book to raise a child with a congenital heart defect who's waiting on a heart transplant. So Dahi has grown up with this, with the attention, but that also means that he's grown up known. He's grown up, heard me time and time again talk about his condition. So he's very aware that he's very aware that if he doesn't get the gift of a new heart, he knows what will happen. And that must be terrifying. It's terrifying for me, so it must be terrifying for Dahi as an 8-year-old to have to process that. But his resilience is something that I've never seen before. It's what keeps me going. It's what keeps our family going, is that he does have this hope. And he talks about getting the gift of a new heart. He talks about throwing his wheelchair in the bin because he won't need it anymore. He talks about his friends. He talks about keeping up with them in the yard. He talks about being able to go out into the yard in the cold winter days, and just talks about how life will be, you know, well, he probably wants to be a heavyweight boxing champion of the world. I don't know how that will be, but he has, in my eyes anyway, as an 8-year-old, already achieved more than any heavyweight boxing champion of the world. And you know, there's just this pride in me of how, in a way, you know, how lucky and also unfortunate I am to be his dad. And that, again, is because you just want the best for your children. But I consider myself a lot more lucky than unfortunate, because, and I know parents will always say that their children are their wee best friend here and their wee best friend there. But if I'm going anywhere or going out or, you know, going to any events, and we go to many sporting events in our family, I couldn't imagine anybody else being with me but Dahi and his little brothers now, who are, you know, 20 months. We've got the 20-month twins and 3-year-old as well. And, you know, when they're a bit older, you know, it's going to be our wee.
Yeah, twins must be a.
No, that's a different kettle of
I
fish.
have a good friend, and very good friend of mine, to be honest, Terence. And they had twins a few years ago, and I can remember going down to the house to see them for the first time. They're both crying at the same time. And do you know what was going through my head? How do you decide? How do you decide which one to pick up? Because you're going like it's
Our
Such
policy is whatever one's louder, pick them up
loudest
first.
first, is it?
Yes.
Loudest first. I suppose that comes from the politics, does it?
No, well,
Whoever shouts
that's
loudest.
it, 100%. Well, no, it's they're at the age now where they're starting to talk and they're fighting with each other and
Brilliant. Yeah.
fighting for food and it's it is almost survival of the fittest. They're at that, and then Carbra, he's got Dahi on one side of him who's waiting for the gift of a heart transplant, and he's got twins this side of him. We're like, I'd be looking at Carbra thinking he's going to be our Matilda. He's going to be the high flyer. He's definitely going to be
Soaking it all up.
resilience is going to be in him because he has. I just can't imagine having, because everybody when you're out wants to see the cute little baby twins.
Twins, yeah.
And then everybody knows Dahi.
Yeah.
So I think Carbra is going to go very far in life.
Yeah. Knows how to hold himself amongst great company.
100%.
Yeah. Obviously, the campaign then has started out, as you said, really to raise awareness around Dahi's condition. What is it today? What's the main focus? I suppose, like you say, awareness. How do people learn about the campaign? What can they do to support you and things like that?
Well, to be honest, it's from the massive victory of Dahi's Law. It's been really difficult to keep that momentum because we had such a victory, and we get people thinking that the campaign's over. And I understand that. That's not a criticism. But it makes my job more difficult. Because I need to keep, it'll be very difficult to replicate that success and that, of Dahi's Law, because all eyes were on not only on the likes of BBC NI or the UTV, it was all over the place, from Al Jazeera, from BBC in London, and it's been so it has been a difficult journey, but we are continuing to raise awareness of organ donation, and also letting people know that the best way, whether you are for organ donation or against organ donation, is to register a decision on the NHS organ donor registry. You can opt in or you can opt out, and it's continuing that message through Dahi and through social media, and he is still. He has still been in the media. He had the honour of opening the first ever Lego store in Belfast, and so having massive companies like the likes of Lego wanting to give you that platform to raise awareness of organ donation. So it's what our campaign is all about, really, is trying to get that difficult conversation of organ donation in those everyday things to normalise it. So the awareness, the education, Dahi's Law, the big picture for us is that normalising organ donation in our society, where it doesn't become that taboo or that big of a deal where it's, oh my goodness, organ donation. It's that it just becomes the norm. And we have done so much to get where we are, but there's still so much left to do. And it's so if I can make any appeal, it's don't forget about us. Don't forget about the likes of Dahi, because believe it or not, although Dahi's Law and the education and the awareness has helped save lives, the organ donation waiting list has never been longer. So we're still counting on that, on getting people talking about organ donation. So we're still there, and we're still, I'm still dedicating so much time to it. But I suppose on my journey as well, I've picked up this different skill set, through storytelling or campaigning and advocacy, and I have been helping a number of different campaigns, and I've noticed that whether it is the likes of organ donation or special educational needs or community, that there is kind of this blueprint of how you do campaign, and whether you change words about whether it be organ donation or education or health, or there is this kind of blueprint in campaigning, and I'm now, I'm on this kind of journey of reflection and finding my worth that I helped achieve so much in the last 7 years of Dahi's journey. And I now find myself in the situation where that's what I see myself doing. It's no longer being that teacher teaching Irish language. So I'm on this journey now of finding out, where I sit in society, and it's still, the campaign's always going to be there. But I feel like I've got this wealth of knowledge and skill set now that I'm excited for the future. Of course, Dahi still needs to get that gift of a new heart. But I can now, that's why at the start, when it says, tell me about yourself, it's not even finding myself again, it's finding this new self. And I am for the first time in a very long time excited for the future, because I can see a future where I'm doing something that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
Where Dahi has the gift of a new heart, where my family is thriving, and maybe there will be a time when that lovely house will be there, or those holidays will be there.
Yeah.
But for the time being, I've accepted that this is exactly where I need to be, and that is empowering in itself.
It's I know it's, you look at other people's lives, and myself even, where I moved from Wales, came to a strange country for me,
Yep.
and built a new career and a new pathway, and you sort of accept, and you're going like the trivialness of my journey compared to yours, and you're going like, you think living away from home and what that is, and the homesick and losing your friends and losing your family, but it's nothing in comparison to what you're sharing, and I could just imagine, obviously, the challenges that you and the family have faced, and just hope that everything comes good for Dahi, first of all, but then obviously that you can thrive on the back end. But you've spoken about the campaign, and what comes to my mind, what's the biggest thing that a stranger has done for you during this campaign? Somebody I just think sometimes it's Kieran May.
Yeah.
Kieran May spoke at my TEDx, and he also, 2 seconds, my microphone's dropping over here. Kieran May has spoken at my TEDx, and he used a line, and it was, if you squeeze an orange juice comes out, you squeeze a humanity, and kindness comes out. And I don't know why, it just repeats and repeats and repeats in my head. I've shared it multiple times. I had Kieran in having a podcast, and I asked him a question about that very quote. And that's what came to my mind there, like everything you're doing, the campaign, Dahi, and I just try now to dig into that, that saying of what Kieran, of the kindness of humanity, and I just think of, like, strangers do strange things and unbelievable things sometimes. What's the biggest thing a stranger's done in terms of the campaign or in terms of Dahi?
Well, I was actually lucky enough to be at that talk and hear Kieran say those words. And I thought of this moment, on the journey. The thing is, with our campaign, it's been strangers who have kept us going. It's been, our community and our family and friends have been fantastic. But I think on this journey, and with organ donation being such an emotive subject, and sometimes you question yourself, are you asking too much of people? Am I pushing this message too far? Because people are making decisions about organ donation at the most traumatic time of their lives, when they've lost a loved one or about to lose a loved one in certain traumatic circumstances that organ donation can take place. And at that time, I'm asking them to make that decision. So that in itself, when strangers are making a decision in the worst, most darkest time in their lives to give light to other families, to other strangers that they don't know and probably will never meet is unbelievable. However, that's kind of the big picture one. But for me personally, it was when I did have all these doubts about, am I asking too much? And an older lady approached me on the street, and she said to me, she grabbed hold of my hand, and she had a thick West Belfast accent, and she said, son, I need you to keep doing what you're doing. And I said, what is it? Can I help you with something? And she said, she grabbed my hand tighter and said, son, my son took his own life 2 years ago. And when they asked me the question to donate his organs, I ran out of the room screaming. I came back a while later and agreed to donate his organs, and he saved 2 lives. And my grandson, his son, talks to me about their daddy as a hero. And she grabbed me tighter again to say, I need you to keep doing what you're doing, because if I had have known your wee man's story and how organ donation impacts other families, that would have taken a bit of that trauma away from me if I had have known that. So you need to keep telling the world and keep doing what you're doing, son. And it makes me emotional now even thinking about it, because I did have those doubts. And when you get a donor family like that saying that to you, that has been one of the most impactful things in the whole journey, that says to me, keep going. It's not just about the likes of Dahi waiting on the gift. That's coming from somebody who has made the decision to donate their own child's organs.
Look, we have a nephew in the family who is with us today simply because of bone marrow donation. You know what I mean? That, again, was given a very, very slim chance of survival of leukemia.
Yep.
And he's with us today, and that became because none of us, or none of the family, were matches. And it was just a stranger somewhere in the country that donated bone marrow. That means we still have a nephew.
The bone marrow as well. You know, it's the amount of people who are registered on the bone marrow register as well. It is so much lower than the NHS organ donor register. I think I want to hazard a guess. It's about 2 or 3 or 4% of our population have registered. But you know firsthand of, you know, and that's the thing on a journey like this, whether it's, you know, solid organs or bone marrow or blood, you know, that it doesn't just save the person. It saves their family. It saves their friends. It saves communities.
Yeah.
It you know, there are so many people around that one person. Yeah. And it gives them their life back as well.
Yeah, yeah. Before I get to the last question, I want to ask you, if Dahi was going to listen to this podcast back, what's the one message you'd want to say to him today?
I would just say, because if he were to listen to this podcast and hear me say things like, you know, that I'm lucky, but it was also unfortunate, that I would just love, and I do tell Dahi every day that I love him and all that, but how I would, you know, express my gratitude, I would just say thank you to him. Yeah. Thank you for being the most inspirational person in the world to me. Thank you for giving me a purpose in life. and thank you for being my son. And I really, suppose I really hope that all this hard work does pay off, and that
Look,
get
it
that
is
call.
paying off, I think from what I've heard and what I've read and the research I've done, that it's paying off because it's having an impact not only on Dahi's life, but other people that are in a similar or same situation to him. And, that's down to yourself
Yeah.
and the family, obviously, what you've done. And I know there's always a face to a campaign, but there's many people behind it,
No,
isn't it?
100%.
And I think that's a very important thing. Yeah.
I suppose as well that
Yeah.
if I can be a bit vulnerable here as well, and just to say that I hope he's proud of me.
Yeah.
I really do hope he's proud of me.
Yeah. I think 100%. I think he is. Anybody that gets a law inscribed into any political environment in the name of their son, I think is something special. And to think that law is about other people, and it's in his name, which is going to live into history. And maybe it's something you'd prefer not to have had to deal with. But on the back of that, you've what you've done is unbelievable, and the fact that law exists now in his name, I think, is unbelievable for people. So I can only take my hat off to you, and I'm sure he's a proud kid for that.
Thanks for saying that.
So we're going to finish with something. I don't know whether it will be light-hearted or not, but we have this. We have this thing, when we create a season, we create a question at the end, and it's always the same question for everybody. So this season, we started the series with a rocket scientist, young lady, Emily from Queen's University. And remember the TV show Room 101, where you'd pop something into Room 101? So we came up with this idea that we would ask the question is, if you could fire anything off into space today, no matter what it is, it can be a concept, a law, or absolutely anything. What would it be and why?
If I could fire anything into space.
Be controversial. Fire some politicians up there if you want.
Well, if I could fire one thing.
One thing off into space.
My goodness. I'm struggling. If I could fire one thing off to space.
And it's stuck there, never coming back.
Let me think. And it can be anything.
Anything at all. We do have a cactus up there, I can tell you that.
If I could fire, oh my goodness.
Anything at all.
I don't know how big or how small.
Oh, it does. Look at it. It can be something trivial. It can be for a dislike or a like.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the easy one would be, Dahi's heart condition, but that's too easy to do, But because of course, that's the one thing that I would shoot up into space. On the other hand, if Dahi wasn't born the way he was born, if he didn't need the gift of a new heart, then maybe so many other people might not be walking about.
Yeah, we wouldn't have Dahi's law, would we?
Because of that. And that's why I think that we're in the exact place that we're supposed to be. So if I could personally, selfishly shoot anything up into space in my rocket, it would be that little monkey I have on my shoulder of self-doubt sometimes. I know self-doubt is probably healthy in some ways. However, I would probably shoot that little monkey up into space.
Look, we had a very interesting lady on this series at one point, and we were talking about imposter syndrome and self-doubt. And I think in a roundabout way that what she described was, it's a conscience. It's not imposter syndrome. It's not self-doubt. It's just your conscience. because people that come in as imposters don't have it.
Well, I've,
You know what I
I've
mean?
never actually thought about it that way. That's very interesting.
So if you feel that way about things, it's because you care, it's because you have a conscience, and you're afraid of being judged about something you're trying to do, whereas imposters don't care about being judged. You know, so
what you've just said there sounds a lot like me.
so it's just that way. But look, let me tell you, it's been hard to listen to, but exceptionally very humbling to listen to. And I think all I can say is all the best with the campaign. We are going to be supporters definitely from this point on, and we'll do everything we can to leverage you and the family if we can help in any way and trying to help that story get. I know it's like you say, it's global already, but if there's something, you know, we can do to raise that profile, we certainly will. And wish Dahi all the best for us, and we'll be obviously following that story as well. And I'd maybe love to get you back at some stage and maybe bring the young fella in.
Totally.
If he's up for a wee conversation on microphone, I would love maybe to do that and just get his perspective on things.
1,000,000%.
And we'd love to do that. But
that would be lovely.
Máirtín, absolutely. I'm blown away. Absolutely. Sitting here on a Monday afternoon, not knowing what this conversation is, but you've opened my eyes to, you know, what I thought I knew a bit because of my nephew's situation, but you've absolutely opened my eyes to the challenges that families face with this. So I hope the podcast raises a bit more awareness, and we'll do our best to share this further and wider than every other conversation, because I think they're all important, but I think this just has an edge at the moment. So thank you so much.
Well, I'm very grateful for that you give me the opportunity and lend me your platform to get that story out there, because it's all we can do really is share the story in the hope that somebody will listen and pass it on. I'm
sure there's a lot of people out there that take interest in this one. So thank you very much, mate. Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Máirtín.